You've been denying the only possible conclusion, the only viable explanation to how you went from being everyone's favorite, everyone's most likely to succeed, the one they used to brag and rave about, to somewhere on the playground, or somewhere trying to grab a sack, or somewhere drunk, or somewhere dissatisfied, growing further and further in resentment and bitterness, becoming less and less of an expression of your true self. And there's only really one explanation for it, but we wrestle so hard against it that we come up with other excuses. We blame other people. We blame circumstances. We obsess over the past, and we blame things that are not currently happening to us in the present. We say that it is the effects that still linger from what happened in the past that stop us from being who we are and doing what we want to do. But at some point, if our whole life has been nothing but a perpetual wheel of doing what we don't want to do, getting what we don't want to get, how are we so confident to say, but it's not me though? This is just who this person has made me. This is just what these set of circumstances have caused me to express. But the minute that I can free myself of this or that person, I'll be this imaginary version of myself that's everything that I'm not operating as today. There's no such thing as a touchy topic. There are issues that people are very dishonest with themselves about, so it becomes hard to have truthful and factual conversations about it without emotions coming into the picture, without people defending where they are or what they believe. And all of it is really birthed from our fear of ever appearing to be inferior to anyone or anything. To the point that it is a very known cliche, I will fake it till I make it. I will pretend to be perfectly fine living in poverty and act like I don't even want to be rich until I figure out how to be rich. But every day I wake up in poverty and I put a smile on my face, and I try to put a smile on your face so that I can gain the acceptance and approval of you, because that's all I got to settle for, being that I ain't got no money to do nothing else. Every day under the surface, I'm trying to figure out how to escape the situation I'm in, and I'm imagining what it was going to be like when I'm in a better position. And I'm living amongst this chatter that never stops. Day and night, even when I lay down and try to watch TV, even when I'm eating, even when I'm trying to experience a good moment with my friends, my family, there is this relentless legion of voices that never stops comparing, judging, critiquing, scheming, robbing me of my present moment by getting me so consumed with this imaginary picture that what is real to me seems irrelevant, and what in reality is nothing at all becomes either detrimental to me or essential to me. It would really benefit us all and do us a great service if we would take accountability and admit how often we wrap ourselves up completely in nothing. A Course in Miracles is 1,000,000 pages long, but the book literally begins in the introduction by stating that nothing real can be threatened and nothing unreal exists. And it says that the whole entire course could be summed up in those two sentences. Nothing real can be threatened. So if it's real and it's truly in existence, it's an actual thing, it can never be threatened. It can never be harmed. There's no need to defend it. And nothing unreal exists. So the only thing that could ever possibly be harmed, hindered, or halted would be something that is not real. And what is not real does not exist. So not even that could be hurt or harmed or halted. So to get it in my head that I have an opposition, I have a person that's trying to stop me, I have a system that's trying to stop me, a government that's trying to stop me, a police force that's trying to stop me, whatever it is, it's an absolute lie. It is nothing but my imagination playing tricks on me, the legion of voices speaking lies to me that I partner with, and as I partner with, I birth more illusions. The only thing that an illusion can produce is more illusions. The only thing that fear produces is more fear and more illusions. You've been trying to stop the illusions and stop the hallucinating, but you constantly hang out with your fears. Listen, the iron rod of the universal laws will not bend for you, me, or anybody else. It's a universal experience, and these are universal laws that apply to all of us. The only way for me to settle my relationship with illusions is for me to permanently terminate my relationship with the illusionist that spins all of these illusions into creation. If I want to stop entertaining lies, I have to disconnect from the liar. See, you be trying to disconnect and break away from the wrong people. You be trying to disconnect from others. You be trying to disconnect from your reflections and your mirrors because you don't like the images that they portray back to you that you call the petty, messy things that they did to you that you would have never done to them. It's funny how often we say, I would have never did that. And it be something that we've done to someone else, not once, twice, but multiple times over our course of walking through the physical realm. But to maintain this image of us being upright and commendable and everybody else being lowly and dirty, we don't allow for ourselves to see the full frame. We focus in on only what we want to see about ourselves and cut everything else out of our awareness. Really though, think about it. You call one of your homeboys, one of your homegirls, whatever, and they pick up the phone and you say, what's up? What you got going on? If you pay attention to words, they reveal the truth that the other person may not even be conscious of as they say it. Oftentimes people say way more than they intend to say. And this is the type of emotional imbalance and the natural instinctive chemical reactions that a good prosecutor plays against as they try to prove the guilt of a defendant. No matter how busy your friend was when you asked them, what you got going on? Their answer most likely, we won't say most likely, we'll say probably to be accurate, began with, oh, nothing. And then they proceeded to tell you what they were doing. We've grown to look at this as a figure of speech. You might walk in a room and see somebody completely preoccupied with a whole physical project in front of them and ask them, hey, what you got going on? Oh, nothing. I'm just such and such and such. There's absolutely a part of all of us that knows when we're obsessing over anything in the temporal realm, consumed and glued to what we can produce with our hands, we are completely consumed with nothing. Absolutely, Nathaniel. I'm on my day job where I am compensated not to arrive, but to provide a value to the company that interviewed me in the exchange of money. Now, the only way for me to provide value to said company that I have agreed to exchange my time for money with, I have to be mentally and physically and emotionally present. My physical presence may get me a paycheck. Of course, as every other child, I learned in my adolescent years how to pretend to be doing what it was that I'm supposed to do. But if there's anything that we learn in the field of forms and shadows, is how to be as deceitful as the forms and shadows have been to us. So I'm on my job, which I would not even be on if I did not have the belief that I had in lack, separation, death, and the possibility of failure. If I didn't entertain the things that I didn't have, I would never have filled out the application to go and acquire money to acquire the things that I was convinced that I had to have to do what I imagined myself doing. We talked about that, right? In our last talk. What is it about me that listens for the goodness of a good giver and then receives the gift of a divine idea and then runs off with it and tries to convert it into something that I can manage to understand and carry in my own hands? What else could it be besides a lack of trust based on an ignorance of the true nature of the giver? If I trusted the giver to give me a good gift, I would examine the gift not for what it was lacking and what I needed to add to it. I would rip it open with the expectation of completeness coming from a giver who is whole, loving, and wanted me to succeed from the beginning. My earthly father was not even as deficient as most have assumed God to be towards his creations. My father didn't go out and grab live chickens and bring them to the house and tell me that I had to figure out how to convert it into something to eat. My parents didn't sign me up for a sport and then leave me to figure out how I was going to get my basketball shoes. You know, if my parents signed me up for something, they made sure that I had everything that I needed to be successful at what it was that I was pursuing. But here's the real twist. There were things that I wanted to succeed at that my parents didn't even want me to do. When I first introduced the idea to them that I wanted to be an entertainer, I wanted to make music, there was a ton of kickback. There was talks about the drugs in the industry and the wickedness in the industry coming from a religious background. But you know who bought me my first laptop to make music? My parents. You know who bought me the keyboard? My parents. So not only were my earthly parents willing to partner with me on what they wanted for me, they partnered with me on things that they didn't even want for me because I wanted it for myself. So where do we get the twisted narrative that God only sends his supplies when it's something that supports his desires, even if it goes against yours? You may have something you want to do, and the absence of the provision is actually evidence that God does not approve of what it is that you want to do. But and this is coming from people who actually hold the narrative of the Bible to be historical fact. So where was that level of thinking in God when Israel wanted a king and they didn't need one? Why not withhold from them what they wanted? Never have Saul come into the picture. Never put a crown on him. Never have him get lost in his ego and raise hell. Ask yourself, would the absence of Saul have taught them anything if that had been a historical account? Have you ever learned anything the easy way? When somebody told you that something was hard, somebody told you that something had consequences, did you ever fully partner with the idea that those consequences and outcomes applied to you? No. The truth of the matter is you have always gotten exactly what you asked for, whether you realize that you asked or not. You have always gotten exactly what you gave attention to. What has grown in your physical expression has always been the byproduct of what you watered in the garden of your mind. Those things that you rehearsed, those outcomes that you stared at, whether it was staring in fear or staring in determination, whatever it was, whatever you set your attention on. If you woke up every day trying not to be like your daddy, you know who you are today? You just like your daddy. If you woke up every day trying to be just like your mama, you know who you are today. You are probably just like your mama. You carried this fear of being broke your whole life, and you wrestled against it until you got so preoccupied with the war with another individual that you finally stepped away from that work and you became impoverished. Whatever you run from, you run to is the cliche that we're used to. Whatever you fear, whatever you anticipate, whatever you expect, whatever you sit and imagine and put your feelings behind it, you're gonna get it. You always have. And the quicker you come out of the denial of that and stop blaming other people for what has happened to you, I guarantee you'll step off of that hamster wheel and you'll begin to stop spinning yourself in circles, recreating the same dysfunction because it never felt good in the first place. How does the number one three-point shooter or the kid that can jump out the gym and dunk and turn into the guy at the park ready to fight over a foul at half court because he ain't got nothing better to do before he goes smoke his Newport? How does the starting quarterback of a blossoming football team to go from a college prospect to a drug addict somewhere, and then from a drug addict to a workaholic whose biggest accomplishment in that chapter of life becomes, I don't do drugs anymore? How does it happen? Is it circumstantial? Is it the lack of a support system? Is it the infiltration of toxins through a support system? Is it chance? Is it a lesson from God? Is it an attack from Satan? Or is it the compound equation of the fears, obsessions, desires, distractions, and anticipations of the person whose experience you're judging and critiquing at the time? If you ask them, you're liable to hear some of anything. But if you watch them objectively, you would be able to pinpoint in a matter of moments what it is that they do inside of their mind that causes them to constantly encounter the obstacles and undesirable outcomes that they can't seem to stop producing. So why is it that you can see it in moments and they can't? But then there's your will, and there's people who can see your will, and when they try to explain it to you, you become defensive, and you might just cut them out of your life if they say the wrong thing, and you can't see your will. It's because what we're explaining is a universal experience that we all grow through. We constantly tie ourselves up with nothing, like questions in our head about why someone did something. The motive for why anyone did anything that they did is as simple as why you do what you do. Because in the moment that you did it, you're fully convinced that it's taking you to what it is that you'd like to happen in your experience. They're no different. Duh. What's crazy is how quick we are to judge others for their acts of stupidity that they believe will lead them to the promised land when we are constantly doing the same and not seeing it just like they do. But you better believe, just like you sit there and critique and judge and point your fingers from across the room at other people, there is a host of people who can see you. Like we can see you. We see you over there consumed with nothing. We see you over there with this imagination that one day when finances come raining in like manna from heaven, you will be perfectly fine, peaceful, and a swell human being. We see you. Right now in this moment, you're bitter, miserable, jealous, envious, dark, nowhere near the expression of your true self. We see you right now. And when you get that bag that you think is going to change everything, and it changes nothing for how you feel, you going to find yourself right back in discontentment just with some money. And to be real, you're safer discontent without the bag. Y'all hear me talk about the narrative of the story of Jesus Christ as a Nazarene. And we talk about how the presentation of this as a historical, physical account is totally off and totally fabricated. But please don't get it twisted. Please don't think that my refusal to partner with a recreation of an ancient story that I can actually go and get documents to look at in its original form. Like for real, in Christianity, we learned that God was so petty that when the people of Israel were being disobedient, at a particular moment in the history of time, God disconnected himself in communication from his creations and left them in silence for 400 years, giving them the cold shoulder for 4 centuries, bro. That's a different type of petty. Like, maybe not, because you still waiting on some of them people to circle back and talk to you again. And maybe they holding on, waiting for that 400-year mark to let that thing go too. But again, why are we assuming God's character to be as flawed and dysfunctional as ours? He was so petty that he didn't speak for 400 years. He was so upset, so emotional, so disappointed, so distraught, wanted to prove a point to him. I love you so much that I'm going to prove a point to you that may very well be the end of your physical experience because you won't survive it. But I love you. I mean, these were the things that plagued my mind as a child, and then to grow into the knowledge of understanding that there were books removed out of the section between Malachi and Matthew of the original transcript of even the stolen story, because those books do not consistently support what is being fed to the religious system that has built itself on the book. If you can't give me the whole story, you're probably lying at some point, right? I mean, that's what we would say if we were talking about people. But if we're defending our religion, I mean, I guess we find ways to wiggle around that and little loopholes to jump through. But if we were talking to a person and they were not disclosing to us all of the details and all of the facts, we would say that that person is hiding something. And they're probably hiding something because there's something that they don't want me to know. But in religion, we have said things in place like you don't question God. The man of God in the pulpit is listening to the voice of God within him that the people below, I guess, don't have access to. And he is speaking a divine word down upon the people of God. So even the things that you're being taught from the pulpit, you don't question, because though they come from the mouth of a man, they come from the heart of God. So can't question that either. And what's wild is the fact that we're perfectly fine with this idea that we have to be or would need to be indoctrinated if it was actually information about something good. If you were trying to give me or show me that God was good, you would not have to build so many loopholes to keep me from thinking for myself, because I would identify the goodness, I would embrace the goodness, and I would want to enjoy the goodness. But if you're telling me things to control me, you probably need said systems in place, like you don't question this, because in reality, this is working against you, and you just may notice one day that this is the very thing that's causing you a hindrance, but you can't stop it, because as you go to understand it, you have to question it. And what's happening to you is happening to you because God has called that upon you. So you don't question that. Again, I don't understand how religion has adopted so many rules when things are playing out the complete opposite in the book that it is based on. In the book, there is a blind man roaming around. The disciples question their teacher. They question Jesus and say, Jesus, why is that man born blind? Why was he born blind? Was he born blind for the sins of his parents? Was he born blind for his own sins? And they are informed that the man was not born blind for anyone's sins. He was born blind for the glorification of Christ. So not only did they not get in trouble for asking, they got an answer. So again, for my people who subscribe to the physical story of Jesus, I do not understand where the picture of the closed-minded, shut-mouthed, tight-lipped God comes from. Because even after all the modifications to it, it still is not like that in the Bible. So where does it come from other than our imagination? What is it other than nothing? But to us, it's not nothing. To us, it becomes everything. To us, it consumes us to the point that everywhere we go, we're constantly trying to dodge the recollection of what it is that we're running from or what it is that we're running towards and in the absence of. What are all my problems in reality? Nothing. What are all my desires that ultimately become my distractions? Nothing. What is my ego, who I have partnered with and allowed to bully me? Nothing. What is the legion of voices in everything that they shout my direction in hopes that I'll chase behind? Nothing. What is every pursuit that I've ever embarked on lead to? Nothing. When I was under the impression that them people hurt me, what did they do to me? Nothing. Because nothing that's not real exists, and the only thing that exists is love. So any act of love does not truly exist. So for you to get wrapped up in what somebody did to you in the past and hold on to it as the reason why you are now the monster that you've become is nothing but an excuse that allows you to extend your dysfunctional reign. I explained to my brother today my unorthodox approach to communication. Most people I've found are not listening until you say something that they don't like. So when I'm talking amongst people of the world, I'm talking amongst non-believers and non-subscribers of religion, I don't cuss. But if I'm talking to somebody that I know is a devout Christian or a devout Muslim or any practicing religion, anybody that believes in the concept of withholding and sustaining from self the pleasures or actions to appease an outward God, I'm going to riddle that conversation with cuss words because I know that their ears are going to stand tall from the time that I say the first word that they disapprove of. I probably won't leave with a fan, but I didn't come looking for one either. What happens every time is the person becomes so wrapped up in the defense of their presentation that they end up further in the conversation than they're prepared for. And after leaving the conversation, they go home and study a little more. They may go home and study with the intent to find the defense that they have already built to be true for what they want to believe. But either way, it gives them the opportunity to go and discover truth. And you're not here to save anybody. For you to be a doorway to truth is all that you are called to do. For you to sow the seeds of truth is all that you were called to do. Nobody else can grow anything in your garden, in your mind, and you can't grow anything in anybody else's garden, in their mind. Why do you think you've never been able to convince somebody who's convinced that you don't love them, that you love them? Why do you think you've never been able to convince somebody that you're being faithful to, that you're being faithful if they already believe that you're not or can't be? You can't plant anything in anybody else's garden. You can give them the seed, but you still need for that person to take that seed into their sacred garden and plant it into the ground and water it with their attention and allow for it to grow in their experience. That's something that they have to do willingly. That's not something that you can force on nobody. How many of us have fell out with people that we were super cool with because we gave them a seed that they didn't want to plant in their garden, and we felt like they had disapproved and rejected us? They just didn't want to plant that seed. They just didn't want that plant growing in their garden. And ain't nothing wrong with that. If it's such a good seed that you're trying to give them, then why didn't you plant it in your garden? And if it did so well in your garden and you did plant it in your garden and they didn't want it, then just take that seed that you're trying to get them and put some more of it in your garden since it was so serving and so good. There's no reason to fall out with people because they won't water and give attention to the seeds that you wanted for them to put into their garden. It's pointless. Either they want it or they don't. Either they'll plant it or they won't. All you can do is sow the seed. All you can do is give it. And I think it's time that we start explaining really, really simple words like give. When I truly give somebody something, I'm not concerned with what they do with it. If I'm concerned with what they do with what I handed them, then that is more of a loan. That's more of access, utilization of what I have. That's not a gift. A gift is me freely giving to you what you have not earned. What you have not earned. So if you didn't have to earn it to get it, then how could I judge you after you receive it to see if you ever should have gotten it? And again, this takes us back to that book that shows the complete opposite of the belief system that has been developed in our society, that there is a God that sits high, looks low, and is ready to punish those who does not align with him in time. And if you're not ready, you're going to get left behind. We all know the story. We all know the fear that's been perpetually pushed on all of us to get us to operate inside of a particular system of thought and belief. This is who you say God is. You say that God gave you the gift of salvation, gave you the gift of life, gave you the gift of righteousness, gave you the gift of abundance, and left you to figure out how to implement it into your life, how to apply it into your life. And if you don't figure it out in time, you were never worthy of the gift in the first place, and he comes and he takes it back and he leaves you to burn in the lake of fire with the one that he cast down prior to coming and making all things new, meaning that whatever. I'm just saying, if you ever want to locate a demon, you don't have to go and look for somebody that's out here openly worshiping Satan or anything like that, because that's not a demon. That's somebody that's under the same impression as you, somebody thinking that they found the answer to their problems in an outside source, because they do not know that the source of all things is within them and is them. Now, you want to find a demon, you ain't got to even look that far. You want to find a demon, all you have to do is start with your desires that ultimately become your distractions. And those distractions, birthed from your broken paradigms and fixed ideas that were developed inside of the illusion of time and experience, are your demons. Those are not things that you have. Those are things that have you. You ought to be tired of chasing your tail. You ought to be tired of running in circles. You ought to be tired. You ought to be tired of creating the space that you're in the moment, then growing discontent with it and wanting out of it so bad that you disappear back into the same ego and listen to the same legion of voices that brought you to this place, to find an escape route and to find a new destination. Not understanding or never really realizing that every time this voice gives you a destination, it takes you to a refashioned experience that is a reflection of your unaltered emotional state. So here you are in a new city with the same old mindsets. Here you are at a new job with the same complaints based on the same overthinking and judgments. Here you are with a new partner, telling this partner everything that you have experienced with the last partner in hopes that they don't do it, not understanding that the only reason they'll ever do it is not because of that conversation that you had with her or him when y'all first met, but it's because that conversation was an indication of how much you held on to the fear of it happening again and how you ran from that so tough that you got to a person that you wanted to be the answer, and you tried to indoctrinate them with everything that you didn't want so that they wouldn't ever cross the line. And then they do, because they are just as unaware of their inner I amness as you are. So consistency is something that they wrestle with. Knowing what they want is something that they wrestle with. So it might not even be that they was lying when they said they loved you and then cussed you out the next day. It might have just switched up just that fast. Not that the love was real, but they were under the impression yesterday that they loved you. That's why they said it. How many times have you said things that you thought you really meant, and then you found out when you got to moment you spoke on, you did something completely opposite of what you said you would? Not because you were a liar or you intended to lie. Your ignorance just leaked through your expression of your words. But we get so concerned with how people see us that we don't even like to admit that. We don't even like to admit that sometimes I fall short of who I say that I am. Sometimes I'm not who I think I am. Sometimes I'm operating completely contrary to who I say I am, and I don't even see it. Your emotions will blind you. Your circumstances will blind you. Your thoughts will blind you. Your desires will blind you. And that's why living by sight is not an option. That's why chasing desires, even if all of them are good, is not an option. Because with every good desire comes things that I don't want along with what it was that I desired. And then I have to keep building more desires to try to rid it of what I don't want. And it's a never-ending cycle. Partnership with truth. Partnership with the factual information that states over my life and your life that all things have been freely given to us prior to us ever entering this physical existence. And the only thing that I have to do to acquire these benefits of my Father and my Creator is to know who He is and who I am. Once those identification issues are settled, I can operate in application. We are trying to apply universal truths to a universally accepted lie. We are trying to take the universal laws and govern the ego, which is non-existent, unreal, so it's nothing, by a universal law that only covers things that truly exist. Your ego ain't never gonna be faithful. Your ego ain't never gonna get rid of doubt and convert over into the belief and knowledge and confidence in a divine presence that flows from within. Your ego is never gonna shake fear, because the ego is where fear is produced through the illusions that it entertains. Your ego will never be beyond being petty and being vindictive and being spiteful and being judgmental, because these are the byproducts of its existence. Comparison comes from the ego. So for me to get to a place of joy and not be robbed of it, I have to rid myself of comparison. But comparison is a natural consequence of a partnership with the ego. So my partnership with the ego must be broken. But I can't put my ego in a corner and think that I've settled it and I've dealt with it. The ego must be crucified. It must be destroyed, as it must be identified as the nothing that it is. That is the crucifixion of the ego. The crucifixion of the ego is to come into an awareness of its nothingness. Nothing that the ego says after I've come into the awareness of it being nothing is relevant anymore. So that voice has died. That presence has died. That entity is no longer reigning over me. I am no longer a slave to what should have been always a slave to me, being my brain. The brain was given to us as a gift, a communication mechanism. It helps us communicate with others. It helps us communicate with ourselves. It helps us communicate with the divine presence that we emanate from. But that brain, left unmanaged, actually turns and begins to enslave our true nature and our true self, and begins to drive all of the dysfunction that we wrestle with ending on a daily basis. I'll tell you in a heartbeat that the historical account of slavery is not only fictitious, but it was used as one of the greatest mechanisms of control for pigmented people. If I could convince you that once upon a time, something was done to this group of people that was unstoppable and so bad that you don't even talk about it in public openly, then it probably would stop you from acting against certain activities and decisions being made over you now that aren't considered fair. But in the picture of the lie of the presentation of what slavery was and how it was on a day-to-day basis in the South, in that picture, there's value for us in the realm of truth, because this is the picture when you take it and uno reverse it. That becomes the picture of our relationship with the brain, our illegitimate relationship with our brain. The slave who was designed, designated, purposed for the field and for work and to be a subordinate, has overtaken the entire plantation. And not only has he overtaken the plantation, he appears to have been given authority over the master. Could you imagine walking outside on the plantation and seeing one of the slaves ordering massa around and beating massa with the whip? And massa don't do nothing about it, because massa done forgot master role. Master done forgot that that's his slave, and the slave isn't his master or his owner. Silly picture, right? But we look just as silly when we allow our brains to run us in circles and run us amok and send us into depression and get us locked into the idea that we're not okay. The mind was designed to help you. You were made for dominion and authority. The brain is a subordinate. The brain is a follower. The brain is not a leader. The brain does only what the brain is told to do. And if you don't deposit new information inside of yourself, then the brain, which only knows the past, runs on autopilot, so you can only hope to recreate what you've already had. But if what you already had was so pleasing, then what was the conversation in your head with the Legion of Voices about anyway? Lock in.